Real stories of werewolves of Dogman history from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
I saw myself turn into a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I am an old man, and I have had many adventures and learned many lessons. One lesson I learned was to never make enemies with a witch. When I was 20, I did just that, and as punishment, I was cursed with lycanthropy. In my case, it was a temporary affliction, but it was only luck that freed me. I'll explain it all, but please let me start from the beginning. When I was that age, two friends of mine and I liked to go around causing trouble. We'd pull little practical jokes like tying people's shoelaces together when they weren't looking, and we were general nuisances, but nobody ever got hurt and we were having a lot of laughs. That is, until one night, when we ran into this woman that our parents had told us to stay away from. The rumor was that she was a witch, but all I knew was that she seemed mean and glared at everyone. When we set out that night, we had no intentions of messing with her or anyone else. But when we stopped at the 7-Eleven to get some liquid refreshment, she was in there too. And she started talking loudly about how bad people drink bad drinks and do bad things. She was giving us dirty looks and talking about us as though we weren't there. We just sort of listened, amazed. It surprised us so much that we didn't even have any wisecracks in return for her insults. Once we were out of there and sitting in the woods drinking down some courage, though, we started to come up with all sorts of good responses that we should have said to her in person. The more we thought about it, the angrier we got. And the more we drank, the bolder we got. And then one of the guys reminded us that this nasty witch, who had put us in a bad mood, lived right in the back of these same woods that we were drinking inside of. She was a 10-minute walk away, and then we could do something to get revenge on her. Before you knew it, we were tripping over roots and rocks, walking through the dark forest over to her house, trying to decide how we would get even. I said we should go throw rocks at her house so that she started thinking she had a habituated Sasquatch. The others didn't know much about Bigfoot, but they liked the idea of throwing rocks at her house, so that was what we did. So brave. Hiding in the dark, throwing rocks at a lady's house. Truly American heroes. Okay, so I'm not proud of that part. But she had started the fight. At any rate, the witch woman came out of her house, and she was saying stuff that I felt I could hear, but I couldn't hear. I mean, I felt as though I were understanding it, even though I wasn't understanding it at all. And then the next thing I knew, I was standing up from my hiding spot and revealing myself to her. When I did this, my two friends all scurried off into the brush to get away from me, like cockroaches when you turn the light on. The woman was looking crazier than I'd ever seen her, and she was saying all this stuff so fast that it was confusing me. It wasn't exactly like she held me in that position. I didn't feel like I was being forced to be there, but I just didn't do anything she didn't want me to do. I just felt like I should stand there and let her yell at me. She said I was cursed, but I didn't understand any of the rest of what she was saying. Then she went back inside her house, and I wandered away. My friends caught up with me and asked me why I stood up like an idiot. I couldn't really answer their question. I think my response was to ask them why they didn't stand up. It just seemed like a thing to do. I guess now looking back on it that she somehow compelled me to do that, but honestly at the time, it just seemed like what I wanted to do. It did not feel like I was being operated like a puppet. It felt more like she just convinced me somehow that I wanted to do what she wanted me to do. And what was so wrong about that? At any rate, we all shrugged it off to a weird experience with an old crazy person. Until, and I know this might sound cliched, but until the next full moon. I was staying home that night because I'd been feeling sick and weird all day. I'm glad I wasn't out when this happened. I was watching something on TV when I began to feel hot. It got worse. I thought I was burning up. I was about to go to the bathroom and get aspirin when I caught a look at myself in the bedroom mirror, and it stopped me in my tracks. I had started growing hair, or really fur, from my face. And I don't mean I was growing a beard. I mean I saw fur on my cheeks, on my nose. While staring at my reflection, my fingertips began to ache, and I looked down to see my nails growing longer and harder. My mouth changed. My teeth grew longer. Even my skin darkened into a sort of a dark gray color. I tore my shirt off. It was happening all over. That witch really had cursed me. I was becoming a monster. Some kind of a werewolf. Not a kind of a werewolf that I had seen before in any movies or shows. But I'm not sure what else you would have called me. I felt like my life had just ended. I was going to do horrible things that night. I was going to become a true living monster. I slammed my room door shut and locked it. I pulled all my curtains closed on my windows. I couldn't lock myself in that room as I wished I could, but I could try to keep others from seeing what was happening to me. I jumped into bed and I pulled the covers over my head, as though that would help anything. I panicked. Was I going to go on a rampage? Was I going to kill my own parents? What was going to happen on that night? Mercifully, what happened on that night was that I fell asleep. I think the cover over my head caused the animal version of me to become bored, and the carbon monoxide I was probably breathing from my own breath all night helped me catch some Z's, no matter how stressed out the situation had caused me to become. When I woke up in the morning, I looked around the room to see nothing disturbed. Well, nothing more than usual. When I ran to the mirror, I saw my normal self. My fingernails were normal too. Everything was fine. The door was still locked to my room, and the curtains were still drawn shut, but there was no other evidence that it had all happened. Still, I was completely unnerved by all of this. I started to stay home at nights for a while after that, instead of hanging with the guys. I kept waiting for the second time the transformation would happen. I didn't want to be in public when it did. Then one day I was talking on the phone with one of the guys, and he mentioned that the old witch had passed on. They found her outside near her house, but she was not breathing. The coroner said it was natural causes. I started to wonder if that meant my curse had been lifted. I couldn't be sure it was, not back then, but I began to hope. I've never transformed a second time, so now as an old man looking back on my life, I can safely say that the curse of the werewolf died with that crazy witch woman. I must be the luckiest werewolf that ever lived. I only had to transform one time, and I never had to kill anyone or anything. And that's my story of the time I saw myself turn into a werewolf.
If you're an urban Dogman, this shirt is for you. It comes in red, white, black, pink, and blue. If you're an urban Dogman, put this on your chest. Let all the world know that you are the best. New Urban Dogman crew neck t-shirt. Link is in the description.
Werewolf licked my sleeping wife. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I had a sickening thing happen to me and my wife. All my friends tell me it was just a sleep paralysis event, and that I'm being overdramatic about it, but I've never experienced such a truly horrifying event before in my life. I fell asleep watching a movie, but no, it wasn't a horror movie. It was some old comedy from the 80s. I literally don't remember the name of it, and there were no actors I recognized in it. Some kind of romantic comedy, and I drifted off to sleep while it droned on. I fell asleep with the TV on, but I hadn't realized I was asleep when I saw the werewolf climbing out of the TV set. At least I assume I was sleeping when this event occurred, because this is what all my friends insist to me. It sure didn't feel like I was asleep, but they say that's how sleep paralysis works. I know the paralysis part is legit because I couldn't move my body at all, really. Well, that's not true. I could kind of move my head a little, and I could look around with my eyes. And what I saw was a werewolf, a hairy, man-like canine monster, and it was climbing out of the television screen as though my TV were a portal to another dimension. When it came out of the screen, it seemed to get larger in a way that shouldn't have been possible. I'm not even sure how to explain it. It was as though I were looking at it through some kind of forced perspective lens or something. It was unnerving, and I wanted to wake my wife and run from the room, but I couldn't. The creature only seemed peripherally interested in me. It was entranced by the form of my sleeping wife, and walked up to her, sniffing her feet. I objected strongly, but no sound came from my mouth. I tried to scream my wife's name, but the creature grinned to see that I couldn't say a single thing, not even a whisper. The werewolf thing seemed to enjoy my torment, as it continued to sniff at my wife's body, edging up slowly toward her face. I thought I was going to lose my mind as I tried to break free from this demon's hold on me. I had to protect my wife. That thing might bite her face off as she slept. I writhed in bed, feeling as if I were tied down. I know I was awake. I know my eyes were open. And I know I was struggling there on the bed. Those parts were not a dream. I was sweating profusely, and lying in a freezing cold pool of my own sweat there on the bed. It was uncomfortable in nearly every way. There was no possibility that this was a dream. I am told that I could be awake yet still dreaming, and that the werewolf was a waking dream. I don't know how that could be fake, but the room was real, my wife was real, my pool of ice-cold sweat was real. But the dogman sniffing my wife was supposed to be fake? How could that be? How could that be? So this creature made its way to my wife's face, as I struggled mightily against my invisible bonds. It was sniffing her neck, and I thought my brain would explode in my head. I was about to watch it bite my wife's flesh and drink her blood. The disgusting creature licked her throat, and I thought I was gonna puke when it licked her face as well. I tasted vomit in the back of my mouth. Just then, there was a loud banging sound outside our room. I saw the dogman look up in shock, so he heard it as well. To me, it sounded like someone was running up our stairs from the ground level of our house. Someone big. Someone heavy. The wolf ran into a dark corner of our bedroom, and I shouted out, in here, to whoever that was running up the stairs. Realizing my paralysis was over, I jumped out of bed, hearing my waking wife behind me asking what was going on. I ran out to the hallway only to see absolutely nobody there. Looking back in the room and throwing the light on, I could see that the werewolf was also gone. I turned the stupid TV off before explaining to my wife what I just explained to you, telling her the whole story. She had a lot of questions, but I had a strong emotional need to search the entire house first, before I could calm down. I looked in every room, every closet, and I made certain that nobody else was in the house besides the two of us. I still couldn't sleep. I was still up for the rest of the night, but I needed to search every place before I could turn the lights out again and let my wife get back to sleep. I understand what sleep paralysis is supposed to be, but I don't see how I could have just dreamed this event. It seemed real the entire time it was happening, and the idea that it was my own mind preventing me from stopping that monster makes less sense to me than thinking it was that monster who held me still somehow, because he wanted to smell and lick my wife. Now, I want to protect my wife at a very core level. I do not want terrible things to happen to her in her sleep. So why would my own mind hold me down and prevent me from protecting her? And if it was just a dream, who or what was that banging on the stairs which scared the monster off? Does one really need to be protected from sleep paralysis? No, but one does need to be saved from interdimensional supernatural werewolves who come through the TV screen portal and invade your bedroom to lick your wife's face. Now that we need divine protection from. And that was what I heard running up the stairs. That werewolf and I both heard it. My wife laughs at me, but our bedroom is now filled with holy symbols from world religions. I have crosses and pictures of Jesus and Mary. I have protection spells. I've got Vishnu. I've got Buddha. I don't know if any of these traditions are more correct than any of the others, but I'm not going to hedge my bets. If it's holy, it goes in our bedroom. So far it's worked, and I haven't had a repeat case of the TV monster. I pray before bed every night to protect my wife and myself, and I pray that my prayers are heard. We've saged the house. We'll try anything. I don't ever want to be able to say again that the bedroom invader werewolf licked my sleeping wife. The Giant Werewolf Spirit. Dear Scary Stories NYC. The closest thing to a cryptid story in our family is the one my grandfather told me about, how the werewolf is actually the spirit of nature. He told us he saw one when he was a young man, on his own, working cattle back in the mid-20th century in Nebraska. I looked at a map, and Nebraska is 2 states over to the west of Wisconsin, and sort of 3 states north of Louisiana, so it's not really near any known Dogman hotspots, and this wasn't really a sighting of any known kind of a Dogman. This was something my grandfather himself called a great spirit. We don't have native blood ourselves as far as I know, but several of the other cowboys who worked on horseback with my grandfather in those days were native. I think he got that term and his ideas from them, possibly, but I never asked him directly about that. What he told me was this story. His employers had been urging him and the others to drive the cattle north, to dine on the fine grasses that were over there. The problem was, we were talking about an area that was partially privately owned and partially considered sacred to the local native people. These workers didn't want to follow their orders, and Grandpa and the others said so. It didn't matter, though. It was either do what they were asked to do or lose their work. So, on their way begrudgingly driving the cattle north, a great wind picked up, and dirt and sand was flying at everyone's eyes and noses. The men tied handkerchiefs over their faces as well as they could, then went to work keeping the animals from stampeding back to where they had already come from. It soon became impossible to control the beasts at all, however, when a dark shadow appeared in the sandstorm of swirling air and dirt behind them. It was the shadow of a humanoid form, but much larger than any human that ever lived. It sent the cows into an insane stampede, and the men had little choice but to join. They couldn't stop these cows, but they had to keep them within sight and follow them, hoping to be able to regain control after they had tired themselves out and calmed down again. Grandpa said it might have stood on 2 legs, but this was not your standard fee-fi-fo-fum kind of a giant. This one was far closer to a King Kong sort of a giant. It stood many men in height, and no features were discernible, other than its silhouette of a furry man with tall dog ears, and the 2 glowing amber eyes in the middle of that canine cranium. This was the King Kong of werewolves, or Dogman. That's what it was. I remember being skeptical at first when I heard this as a kid, and I asked if a creature existed that was that large. Wouldn't it be noticeable to all of us? I mean, it would be too large to hide itself very well, and we'd all know about it pretty soon. My grandfather agreed that if such an animal existed, this would be the case. But he did not think this was an ordinary animal. He didn't think it had a home and a mate and a tribe or a pack. He thought this was a spirit of nature that only chose the form it chose for its own reasons, which are beyond man's power to know. It had the power to end them all if it wanted to, just as any large animal would. But it also had the power to drive a person insane. And that proved it was something either super science or super nature, or one or the other. You see, Grandpa said he sensed the herd calming down a bit and he attempted to ride faster and catch up to them. But then behind him, an ear-splitting howl erupted, which my grandfather described as the sound of hell itself. And then the men themselves went as insane as those cows had already gone. Grandpa told me he woke up lying face down on grass with amnesia for several hours before he started to remember who he was and what his job was. I asked if the cows were recovered and Grandpa said most of them were. I asked if he got fired and he told me no. All the men told their story to the boss and tried to quit, but the boss calmed them down and gave them raises to stay. The boss also never asked them again to drive the cattle into the turf of the great spirit of nature, who apparently appears in the form of a giant werewolf. Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.